Curious about what's happening right now in the Dallas-Fort Worth real estate market? I'm Randi Dukes with Repeat Realty, and I'm going to bring you a first quarter update for our area. But I'm curious what you're hearing. Let me know what you think is going on in the market by leaving a comment below. I've been asked a lot about what's happening right now and what we can expect throughout the year. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm going to give you my best thoughts about what I think we'll see in the real estate market. First, what's happening in the current market? We're in the first quarter of 2023, and honestly, this market looks pretty decent for both buyers and sellers. So let's talk first about how it looks for sellers. We are seeing houses sit on the market a little bit longer. There are outliers, of course, like my most recent listing that was under contract over asking in just a few hours, but I'm still telling clients to expect 30 to 60 days. We still have low inventory though, and so it's really still a seller's market. Prices are driven by supply and demand, so we're still seeing a bit of an upward climb on prices. As inventory increases, and I think it will, we'll see room for buyers to be able to negotiate a little more, and sellers will have to be a little more flexible. We've typically seen a drop in prices over last year's crazy market, but as I keep saying, it's not a drop in value so much as a drop in appreciation. Last year, we were seeing appreciation at insane rates, up to 20%. And now we're seeing them start to level out more to the normal average, which should be around 4%. It's really important in this market for sellers to be realistic about listing price in order to sell quickly instead of having inflated dreams about last year's market. One thing that also needs to be considered in this market where housing prices are fluctuating is the appraisal. Last year, on almost every deal, we were seeing waivers where the buyers were essentially saying, we don't care how the house appraises, we will bring all of our money to the closing table and throw it at this house. We're seeing that a little bit in this market, but far less, which means we really need to be setting that listing price accurately, or we're going to be scrambling with a last-minute negotiation when an appraisal comes in low, or potentially losing a deal. And one more thing. We were seeing chaos in the market last year. Houses that were not at all showing ready were being thrown on the market at super high prices, and they were selling. This is not that market. It's really important to set the listing price accurately, have the house ready to show, clean, declutter, make small repairs, and put your best foot forward. As they say, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. Now let's switch to the buyer's view of this market. It's a more affordable market for buyers because of the balance that we're starting to see in appreciation rates, and because buyers typically aren't getting into bidding wars over houses. We still are seeing a little bit of that in certain markets, but it isn't the norm at all. And because buyers aren't having to offer to pay that appraisal gap, we're seeing a little more security there. One big difference we've been seeing, and I talked about this in a recent video, are seller concessions. Seller concessions means the seller is putting money toward closing costs and sometimes even buying down the interest rate for a buyer. We didn't see this a lot in the last couple of years, but it's back in force and we're seeing it a lot in contracts. If you aren't sure about all of the ins and outs, go watch my last video, but it's a great thing for both sellers and buyers. It can help a seller get a house under contract, and it can help a buyer deal with the high interest rates. Since I mentioned interest rates, let's talk about that. Last year, we saw the biggest and fastest rise ever in interest rates. We saw them more than double in less than a year. So to put that in basic terms, the average mortgage payment right now is about $1,000 more than it was a year ago. There was an initial horror over interest rates, and then a lot of people decided it really wasn't a deal breaker. But there was a segment of buyers that decided it really was a deal breaker. They didn't want to be house poor. Maybe they couldn't even qualify for their monthly payment at those increasing rates. Seller concessions helped, but often it just wasn't enough. So we heard a lot of lenders and real estate agents during that time say, date the rate, marry the house. meaning go ahead, buy the house at this crazy rate, and then when interest rates improve, you can refinance. Unpopular opinion, I don't agree. What if interest rates don't get better? And a little side note, they actually have improved a bit. But what if they continue to rise over the course of the year and you can't afford that house? My advice always is to buy the house you can afford right now and then decide what you want to do in the future. So what are we expecting this year? One thing I can say with absolute certainty is that the real estate market is always shifting and changing. It's a very dynamic market. And that's why, as a little aside, it's super important about who you use as your agent. You need to use an agent that's keeping up with the shifts in the market. Sometimes we're seeing terms on contracts change overnight. And if you're not using an agent that's keeping up with those shifts, you don't have your best shot at buying or selling a house. Regarding interest rates, as inflation rises, mortgage rates will likely rise too. And as inflation stays high, mortgage rates will probably stay high as well. What about a recession? A recession doesn't mean falling home prices. Out of the last 6 recessions, only 2 saw a drop in home prices. But while a recession might not mean a drop in home values, it probably will mean a drop in mortgage rates. For those holding out for the wave of foreclosures that they are certain is coming, they're not coming. This isn't a repeat of the 2008 market. And this is because we have tighter lending standards and people have more equity in their homes. They're living in homes that they can actually afford. The mortgage delinquency rate just dropped for the 2nd quarter in a row, and it's at its lowest level since 1979. That's significant. While the headlines are telling you that foreclosure rates are up, and they are, it's important to interpret the headline. The reason they're up is because they were on pause during the pandemic over the last 2 years. Foreclosure rates right now are still at a level far below the standard market. So how should you approach the market? I just read a great quote from the Deputy Chief Economist for First American, and I think it sums it up well. If you can find a house that meets your financial expectations for a monthly payment and it's a good time for you to buy, then do that. And if you wait for prices to fall but they never do, you may discover the hard way that the house you found a year ago that you really loved, that you could afford but you passed up, is more expensive next year. This is so true. We've seen a lot of it over the last couple of years. I'm not one to ever push you into buying if the time is not right, but I do think it's really important for you to weigh all of the factors and make a wise decision that works best for you. If I can give you any specifics about the Dallas-Fort Worth market or help you buy or sell a house, please reach out. My contact information can all be found below.